They say blood is thicker than water, but let me tell you something, greed is thicker than both. I learned that the hard way when I had to fake my own death just to see what my family really thought of me. What I discovered sitting in that funeral home, watching my own memorial service, changed everything I thought I knew about the people I'd loved my whole life. My name is Catherine Hayes, and this is the story of how I came back from the dead to make sure the right people got what they deserved. You know, when you're 78 years old, and the doctors tell you that you've got maybe 6 months left, you start thinking about legacy. About what you'll leave behind. About who really loved you and who was just waiting for their inheritance check. I thought I knew my family. God, was I wrong? It started 3 months before my supposed death. I was living in my house in Marin County. You know, one of those sprawling California homes with the perfect garden and the view of the bay. I'd worked my whole life for that house. Started with nothing, built a small tech company in the 80s before anyone knew what Silicon Valley would become. Sold it for more money than I ever dreamed of having. But here's the thing about money. It changes how people see you. Even family. I'd been feeling weaker lately, having more bad days than good ones. The cancer was winning, and we all knew it. My daughter Sarah and my son Michael had both been coming around more often. At first, I thought it was because they were worried about me, wanted to spend time while they still could. I should have known better. It was a Tuesday when I overheard the conversation that changed everything. I was supposed to be napping upstairs, but I'd gotten thirsty and was heading to the kitchen when I heard voices in my living room. Sarah and Michael were there with their spouses, and they were talking in those hushed tones people use when they think no one's listening. "Mom's getting worse," Sarah was saying. "Dr. Peterson thinks it might be sooner than 6 months." "Good," Michael replied. And that one word hit me like a punch to the gut. I mean, it's better that she doesn't suffer too long. But his wife Jennifer actually laughed, and said, "Come on, Mike. We're all thinking it. The sooner this is over, the sooner we can settle the estate and move on with our lives." I gripped the banister so hard my knuckles went white. Sarah's husband David chimed in next. "Has anyone seen the will recently? I know she updated it last year, but with her mind going." "Her mind isn't going," Sarah snapped, but then she paused. "Although she has been more forgetful lately. Maybe we should suggest she review it one more time. Make sure everything's fair." Fair. As if they had any right to my money. "The house alone is worth $3 million, Michael said. "Plus whatever she's got in investments. We're talking serious money here." "Split 4 ways though," Jennifer added. "Don't forget she's leaving a quarter to that charity." "That's what pisses me off," David muttered. "Some animal rescue getting hundreds of thousands while we're the ones who've been taking care of her." Taking care of me? I nearly laughed out loud. These people visited me twice a month and acted like it was a burden. "We need to make sure she's thinking clearly about this," Sarah said. "Maybe suggest that family should come first. That charity will survive without her money, but this could change our kids' lives." That's when I realized they weren't there because they loved me. They were there because they were counting my money while I was still breathing. I made it back to my room without them hearing me, but I couldn't stop shaking. These were my children. I'd raised them, put them through college, helped them buy their first homes. Sarah was a teacher, Michael worked in marketing. Neither of them was struggling, but apparently, that didn't matter when there was a fortune at stake. That night, I called my lawyer, Richard Morrison. We'd been friends for 30 years, and I trusted him more than anyone. "Richard," I said when he answered, "I need to see you tomorrow. And I need to ask you to do something that's going to sound completely insane." The next day, I sat in Richard's office and laid out my plan. I wanted to fake my death. Not permanently, just long enough to see how my family really felt about me. Long enough to watch them fight over my will and show their true colors. "Catherine," Richard said, leaning back in his leather chair. "You can't be serious." "I'm dead serious." I smiled at my own pun. "Look, I'm dying anyway. We both know that. But I want to know who these people really are before I decide what they get. This could have legal ramifications. Only if we get caught. And we won't, because you're the best lawyer I know, and I'm a dying old woman with nothing left to lose." It took me 3 weeks to convince him, but Richard finally agreed to help. The plan was simple. I'd check into a private clinic under a false name, They'd fake my death certificate, and Richard would handle the funeral arrangements. I'd watch my own memorial service from the back, see how people really felt about me, and then decide what to do next. The hardest part was the physical preparation. I had to make myself look sick enough that people would believe I died suddenly. I stopped eating much, stopped taking some of my medications that helped with energy, let myself get pale and frail looking. It wasn't hard. The cancer was doing most of the work anyway. 2 weeks before my planned death, I called Sarah and Michael separately and told them I was updating my will one more time. I wanted to see what they'd say. Sarah's response was immediate. "Mom, you've already been so generous to that animal rescue. Maybe it's time to focus on family? I mean, Emma's starting college next year, and you know how expensive that is." Michael was more direct. "Whatever you think is fair, Mom. But remember, Jennifer and I are trying to buy a bigger house, and the market is crazy right now. Every little bit helps." Every little bit. Like my life's work was pocket change they were entitled to. I told them both that I was still thinking about it, that I'd let them know what I decided. What I didn't tell them was that I'd already made my decision. I was going to test them first. The day of my fake death was October 15th. I checked into the clinic early that morning, and by evening, Richard had made the calls. Heart failure, he told them. Peaceful, in her sleep. I have to admit, sitting in that clinic room and listening to Richard describe my death over the phone was surreal. But nothing prepared me for what came next. Within 2 hours of the calls, both Sarah and Michael were at my house. Not to grieve, to search. I know this because I had security cameras installed throughout the house the week before. Richard helped me set up a way to watch the feeds from my phone. I watched my own children go through my personal belongings while my body was supposedly still warm. Sarah went straight to my desk, looking for recent financial documents. Michael headed to my bedroom, checking drawers and my jewelry box. Their spouses were more subtle, but I could see them eyeing furniture, artwork, probably mentally dividing up my possessions. "Did she say anything to you about changing the will again?" I heard Sarah ask Michael through the audio feed. "Just that she was thinking about it. God, I hope she didn't do something stupid and leave it all to charity." "We need to find that will," Jennifer said. "Make sure we know what we're dealing with." They spent 3 hours in my house that night. 3 hours that should have been spent grieving, making funeral arrangements, calling relatives. Instead, they were treasure hunting. The funeral was set for the following Monday. Richard had arranged for a closed casket, easier to fake that way. I spent the weekend watching my family's reactions, and I have to tell you, it was both heartbreaking and enlightening. Sarah cried, but only when other people were around. When she thought she was alone, she was on her phone with financial advisors, asking about estate planning and tax implications. Michael didn't even pretend to be sad. He was openly discussing renovation plans for his new house with Jennifer. But the worst part was listening to them talk about me. "Mom was always so stubborn about money," Sarah told her husband while they were making funeral arrangements. "Always acting like we were after her fortune. I mean, what did she expect? We're her children. At least we won't have to deal with her lectures about responsibility anymore," Michael said to Jennifer. "God. Remember how she used to go on about earning your own way? Easy to say when you got lucky with one tech company." Lucky. 30 years of 18-hour days, building something from nothing, and he called it luck. The day of the funeral, I sat in the very back of the chapel wearing a black dress, sunglasses, and a wig. I looked like any other elderly mourner paying respects. No one recognized me. Richard gave a beautiful eulogy about my generosity, my work ethic, my love for my family. I almost believed it myself. Then came the part where family members were invited to speak. Sarah went first. She talked about what a wonderful mother I'd been, how I'd taught her the value of hard work and compassion. She cried real tears, and for a moment, I thought maybe I'd been wrong about her. Then she said, "Mom always told us that family comes first, and I know she'd want us to take care of each other the way she took care of us. Family comes first." I'd never said that in my life. What I'd always said was that you take care of the people who take care of you. Michael's speech was shorter and more to the point. He talked about my legacy, and how important it was to honor her wishes, and keep the family together. Everything was code for, Make sure we get the money. But the real show started after the service, during the reception at my house. I didn't go to that part. Too risky. But I watched every minute through my security cameras. That's when the gloves came off. So when do we meet with the lawyer? Jennifer asked Richard, who was handling the reception details. Usually these things take a few weeks, Richard replied, playing his part perfectly. We need to let the dust settle. A few weeks? Michael said. Come on, Richard. You've been managing Mom's affairs for years. Can't we at least get a preview of what we're dealing with? Sarah tried to be more subtle. We just want to make sure we understand Mom's final wishes. You know how she was always changing her mind about things. That was rich, considering I'd had the same will for 5 years before this whole charade started. But then David said something that made my blood boil. Look, we all know Catherine was getting a little confused toward the end. If there's anything in that will that doesn't make sense, anything that seems out of character, we might need to contest it. Contest my will. They were already planning to contest my will. I mean, Jennifer added. She was on a lot of medication. Pain makes people make strange decisions sometimes. I had to turn off the feed for a while. I was so angry I was shaking, and I was afraid I might do something stupid like march back into that house and confront them all. But this was exactly what I needed to see. This was who they really were. The next few days were fascinating to watch. Sarah and Michael were in contact constantly, plotting and planning. They brought in their own lawyer to review my will when it was read. They started making lists of my possessions, and discussing how to divide them up. They also started bad-mouthing me to anyone who would listen. Mom was always so paranoid about money, Sarah told her neighbor, Mrs. Chun, who'd brought over a casserole. She thought everyone was after her fortune. It's sad really. Michael told his golf buddies. The old lady was getting pretty suspicious toward the end. Started thinking we only visited for money. Crazy, right? But the thing that hurt most was what they said about the charity I'd been supporting. The Golden State Animal Rescue had been close to my heart for 15 years. I'd volunteered there, donated regularly, even served on their board. These people had saved hundreds of animals, and I'd planned to leave them enough money to build a new facility. That dog charity is getting way too much, Sarah said to Michael during one of their planning sessions. 1/4 of the estate? That's insane. We need to find a way to reduce that. Or eliminate it entirely, Michael agreed. I mean, they're just animals. Family should come first. Just animals. These were the people I'd raised to have compassion and empathy. A week after the funeral, Richard called a meeting to read the will. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I positioned myself across the street from Richard's office in a coffee shop, where I could see everyone arriving. Sarah and Michael showed up together, both dressed in black like they were still mourning. Their spouses came too, probably to make sure they didn't miss anything important. They'd also brought their lawyer, a sharp-looking woman who probably specialized in contesting wills. I gave them an hour to get settled, then I walked across the street and into Richard's office. The look on their faces when I walked into that conference room was worth every day of planning this elaborate scheme. Sarah literally fell out of her chair. Michael went white as a sheet. Jennifer started hyperventilating, and David just kept saying, "What the fuck?" over and over again. "Hello, children," I said, taking a seat at the head of the conference table. "Don't I look good for a dead woman?" "Mom," Sarah whispered. But we buried you. You buried an empty casket, sweetheart. I've been very much alive this whole time." "This is impossible," Michael said, standing up. "This is some kind of sick joke." "Sit down, Michael." My voice was calm, but there was steel in it. "We have a lot to discuss." Their lawyer was frantically taking notes, probably trying to figure out if there were any legal implications to what had just happened. Richard just sat there with a slight smile on his face. "I know what you're all wondering," I continued. "How is this possible? Why would I do such a thing? Well, let me tell you." I pulled out my phone and opened the security camera app. "For the past week, I've been watching you. I've seen how you really feel about me. I've heard what you think of my generosity to charity. I've watched you go through my personal belongings like vultures before my body was even cold." Sarah started crying. "Mom, we were just trying to." "You were just trying to what?" Make sure you got your share? Plan how to contest my will if you didn't like what it said. Michael tried a different approach. Mom, you have to understand. We thought you were dead. People grieve in different ways. Do they grieve by calling their mother stubborn and paranoid? By referring to 30 years of hard work as getting lucky? By planning to steal money away from a charity that saves animals' lives? The room went dead silent. They realized I'd heard everything. Here's what's going to happen, I said, pulling out a new will that Richard and I had prepared. This is my real final will and testament. The one I've decided on after seeing who you people really are. I started reading it aloud. To my daughter Sarah, who thinks family should come first, I leave the family Bible and my recipe collection. You always said you valued family traditions. Sarah's face went from hope to horror as she realized what was happening. To my son Michael, who thinks I got lucky in business, I leave my collection of business books and my first computer. Maybe you can learn what luck really looks like. Michael started to protest, but I held up a hand. To my son-in-law David, who thinks I'm confused and paranoid, I leave my medical records. You can see exactly how clear my mind has been throughout this entire process. And to my daughter-in-law Jennifer, who thinks charity money should go to family instead, I leave a donation receipt showing that your portion of my estate has been donated to the Golden State Animal Rescue in your name. Jennifer actually gasped out loud. The rest of my estate, my house, my investments, my savings, everything else, goes to the Golden State Animal Rescue, with the stipulation that they use it to build a new facility and name it after the families who taught me that sometimes the most loyal creatures in your life have 4 legs instead of 2. The silence in that room was deafening. Then all hell broke loose. You can't do this, Michael shouted. We're your children. This is insane. Sarah was crying hysterically. You're punishing us for mourning. We'll contest this, David added. No judge will uphold a will written by someone who faked their own death. But their lawyer was shaking her head. Actually, she said quietly, if Mrs. Hayes was mentally competent when she wrote this will, and if there's documentation of her reasons for the decisions, it would be very difficult to contest. Richard smiled and pulled out a thick folder. Oh, we have documentation. Hours of video footage of everything that's happened since Mrs. Hayes' supposed death. Every conversation. Every plan to contest the original will, every disparaging comment about her wishes. I stood up. You want to know the really sad part? If you had just loved me, really loved me, not my money, you would have inherited everything. If you had spent this week grieving instead of scheming, if you had honored my memory instead of picking apart my choices, if you had trusted that I knew what I was doing with my own money, you'd be millionaires right now. Sarah looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. Mom, please. We made mistakes, but we love you. No, I said sadly. You love what I could give you. There's a difference. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and don't worry about my funeral expenses. The Golden State Animal Rescue has offered to throw me a lovely memorial service. It seems they actually cared about me, not just my money. As I reached for the door handle, Michael made one last desperate attempt. Mom, please. Think about Emma and Jake. Your grandchildren. Don't punish them for our mistakes. I paused. He was right about one thing. My grandchildren were innocent in all this. You're right, Michael. Emma and Jake don't deserve to be punished. Hope flickered in his eyes. That's why I've set up education trusts for both of them. Full college tuition, but the money goes directly to the schools. They'll never have to worry about student loans, but you'll never be able to touch a penny of it. And with that, I walked out of the conference room, and out of their lives. The next few months were interesting. Sarah and Michael did try to contest the will, but it was hopeless. The video evidence was overwhelming, and I was very much alive and mentally competent. Their lawyer dropped them after the first hearing. They tried to contact me, of course. Calls, emails, letters showing up at my house. I had my phone number changed and hired security for a while. I wasn't ready to forgive, and I wasn't sure I ever would be. The Golden State Animal Rescue was thrilled, obviously. They broke ground on the new facility 6 months later, and it's beautiful. They named it the Hayes Family Memorial Campus, which I thought was ironic and perfect at the same time. I've got about 2 months left now, according to the doctors. The cancer is winning, just like we always knew it would. But I'm not angry about it anymore. I'm actually at peace. You know what I've learned from all this? Sometimes the people who love you most aren't the ones who share your DNA. Sometimes they're the people who show up every day without expecting anything in return. The volunteers at the animal rescue, who visit me every week. Richard, who risked his reputation to help me learn the truth. Mrs. Chun next door, who still brings me soup even though she knows I'm not really grieving. These are my real family. Do I regret what I did? Not for a second. It was dramatic, sure. Maybe even a little cruel. But it was also necessary. I needed to know who these people really were before I died, and now I do. Sarah sent me a letter last week. She said she's been in therapy, trying to understand how things went so wrong. She said she's sorry, that she knows she failed me as a daughter, and that she hopes someday I can forgive her. It was a good letter. Honest. Maybe there's hope for her yet. Michael hasn't reached out at all. I think he's still angry, still thinks he deserved my money just for existing. Some people never learn. But here's the thing I want you to remember from my story. Your family isn't just the people who share your blood. Your family is the people who love you when you have nothing to give them. The people who show up not because they have to, but because they want to. The people who care about your happiness, not your bank account. And if you're lucky enough to have money, or property, or anything valuable to leave behind, think carefully about who deserves it. Don't assume family comes first just because that's what people expect. Give your legacy to the people who earned it with their love, their loyalty, their presence in your life. As for me, I'm spending my last few weeks surrounded by people who actually care about me. I volunteer at the animal rescue when I'm feeling up to it. I have dinner with Mrs. Chun twice a week. Richard and I play chess every Sunday. And sometimes, when I'm feeling strong enough, I drive by the new animal rescue facility and watch them building something beautiful with my money. Something that will save lives and bring joy long after I'm gone. That's a legacy I can be proud of. They fought over my will, all right. They fought hard, and they lost everything. But watching the whole thing, that taught me exactly who deserved to win. And for the first time in months, I'm sleeping peacefully at night.